Welcome everybody, and we're here with our live Q&A, well not live, recorded Q&A with Tommy, COO of Pixspan, here to answer all of your questions. Tommy, how's it going?
It's going great, Aaron. Appreciate you including me this morning.
Awesome, and let's just jump right in. We got a bunch of questions. You guys are on the platform right now in pre-launch. We're excited about it, doing lossless compression. So let's jump right in with a question from one of our people here. Could you explain a little bit about how lossless compression works? I don't understand how it can be smaller and keep all the quality. How does that make sense?
Absolutely. And it's a great question and one that comes up, as you might imagine, all the time. Well, lossless really is our secret sauce, if you will. There's probably 300 companies that have a lossy solution. And what that really means is they take an image and they actually take data out of it. Now, that's great from the standpoint of I can move more data and it makes it smaller, but I can never go back. So once I go lossless, I can never get back to the original image. So our really unique differentiator is when we compress it losslessly, when it comes back exactly like it was, like the original is. So, I mean, simply put, our technology looks at the image, it applies our bit exact proprietary mathematically lossless algorithm to reduce the size. And then when it's rehydrated, it comes back exactly like it was. So you can imagine, if you're looking for the best possible AI and ML, you're certainly going to get that off of a perfect image versus one that had data taken out of it.
Yeah, that's a great example. So I would, with that in mind, give me an example use case like you mentioned. You mentioned AI ML, but maybe an example use case that's kind of really tangible for us of how this could be right. used in practice.
Well, imagine, if you will, you're trying to look at an image, right? And you're trying to zoom in on that image. Well, if there's already been data taken out of that image from a compression point of view, guess what happens when you try to expand on it? It's going to be very fuzzy. When you're doing that from our image, you're looking at and seeing exactly what the sensor sees, so you can zoom in as deep as you want to go. And let's face it, the kinds of decisions that are being made out there really need to be able to see the clarity. That's really the differentiator that we bring.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. So think about zooming in an image. We've all done that.
Right.
Right. And it gets, it always gets worse as you get closer, but there's some that are far worse than others. And yours going to get the best, in theory, because you actually have the full quality and we're not just compressing it down to 72 pixels per square inch or something like, standard digital stuff. Okay, awesome. Makes sense. Exactly. I think it's, worth framing that in the context of space then, right? So as people are sending imagery, because there's a lot of people taking images of space or Earth observation and whatnot, images from space of Earth in many cases and other sorts of things. How does that matter fundamentally? What is it? I think you guys, is it 5x the ability or the speed on stuff like that? Just kind of walk through that, like the pipeline of data, why that even matters at the end of the day.
Well, from my perspective, it matters, from two areas really. If this is like a LEO and you're in low orbit, we'll have that availability window of 7 minutes. So if I can send more data, 3 to 5 times as much data, I now have more data to look at, and I can actually now send it faster. So more data and delivered faster would be the differentiator.
Gotcha. Makes total sense, right? Okay, so I'll zoom on to the next question here. I'll stop my follow-ups. Richard was asking, how many full-time team members are there currently at Pixspan?
We currently have 4 team members and 3 contract subject matter experts that really focus on this space with us.
Gotcha. All right. Well, that was quick and easy. And Leighton was asking, does Pixspan encounter any issues with the resolution limits that are set by the U.S. government? With a follow-up to that, or is lossless compression technology not impacted by those rules?
It's really not. I mean, our technology would simply provide lossless compression to whatever the resolution of the image is. And again, the differentiator would be that whatever we compress, we're going to bring back exactly like it was, where everybody else is going to bring back an image that's been altered, if you will.
Gotcha. Yeah. So what is that limit? Refresh my mind. Do you know what that limit is? Is it like 1 centimeter or something? They can't necessarily, even if they could, government's not going to want them to be taking an image that they can see, I don't know, the pores on my skin or something from orbit. Do you know what that number is?
Aaron, I really don't, but ultimately they will make those decisions, and we won't be affected because whatever we're given, we'll be able to compress and then bring back like it was.
Yeah, I think it's relatively small, but still, right? Now a lot of people are looking at buildings or whatever, but as the cameras get better, as any sensors get better, SAR and all that others, there's going to be essentially no limit at some point to how granular they can go. And then privacy is a concern, right? And so, as you mentioned, right, you operate agnostic to those rules. The people taking those pictures would have to be concerned about those rules. You just give them the best quality that they can deliver.
Yeah, I think the way to look at it is whatever the sensor sees, you would see, because that's really what we're doing. We're taking that camera raw, if you will, and compressing from there.
All right, it makes a lot of sense. Okay, so other than Netflix Messiah, has your tech been used in any other famous series or movies? So I guess the preface to this, if people aren't aware, is that you guys actually you kind of cut your chops with this technology in a different industry other than space. Maybe give a little bit of that and then kind of give the answer to that question.
Well, the answer is yes. I mean, our technology is used on a daily basis to move images for the movie industry. As you might imagine, they're very, very particular, not only about their images, but the security around those images. So, outside of Messiah, that community really doesn't speak or tell us exactly how they're using our technology and what data, who they're moving it for.
But the assumption would be that there's probably some interesting things that you've probably watched on Netflix that was, that utilized your technology at one point or other in that creation chain, right?
Correct. And I'll add a little color to that. I mean, you think about really the challenges around images, right? Nobody out there is asking for, a grainier image delivered slower. Everybody is asking for a clearer image. So it really doesn't matter if it's Hollywood, if it's space, if it's government, everybody has the need for that clearer image. So, the challenge becomes is as they ask for that, as I go from 2K to 4K to 6K, every time I double resolution, I quadruple the size of the data. So that's the real challenge. It's not capturing that image. That's easy. The real challenge is how do I move it? And the uniqueness we have is, we will compress it, as you mentioned, 3 to 5 times density, and we'll move it faster, and we'll protect that image 100%. That is very, very unique and very different than the other folks out there.
So the protection point, right, is interesting for commercial players, like you mentioned, but also interesting for defense applications as well, you would assume. And I'm sure there's something, because some of those conversations you're having. But let's move on to the next question. Your software does image compression only right now. What does your pipeline look like in terms of future features?
Well, clearly our focus is image compression, right? Lossless image compression. However, we're in discussions with a lot of companies, that potentially could embed our technology in theirs. At the end of the day, most solutions have the need to move data. If from an API point of view, our technology could move that data faster and it could protect those images 100%. So we are talking to companies from that standpoint. There's also, a big focus on, there's a lot of the world actually lives around lossy today because that's really all that's existed before we invested years to come up with a lossless solution. And the idea of combining the two is very, very interesting. So, imagine, if you will, whether I'm a satellite and I'm providing lossy, but every so many frames, I want to be able to provide a lossless. So now the ability is, I would have that ability to zoom in. It's kind of like, what is that image? I don't care about that lake. I care about what's in the corner of that lake. Can you zoom in on that? With a combination of lossy and lossless, we would solve that challenge.
Yeah, interesting. And so that brought up something for me. Does this have any applications in, some of the SAR imagery and stuff that could be, I know that's kind of a different data set, but I would wonder, I would assume that there's some applications there potentially.
Absolutely. I mean, you think about synthetic aperture radar, there's a huge amount of that out there, and we have worked with SAR and we compress SAR and can move SAR very quickly. So
Gotcha.
The applicability for the technology is image formats particularly, but yes, actually we've done some testing there with some major players today, and we were able to achieve an additional 25% over what they were getting today. But it's not really only the compression rate, or you will, the density, it's also how fast you do it. So it's really talking about throughput. So compressing faster and more dense.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And that's something I wouldn't necessarily think about off the bat, right? It's just, I'll just compress. But as you mentioned, especially in space, when you're orbiting the Earth, right? You only have so many, passes by every once in a while with so much time. You really need to get everything ready to send quickly and send it quickly. Right?
That's exactly right. That availability window is not getting any longer.
Exactly. Well, unless you have, Starlink or 12,000 satellites or whatever, and everything to connect together, of course, exactly. A little different, but that's a future world, right? And we'll see where we get there at some point in time. Okay, so let's see here. The next question that we have is, what other companies are interested in partnering with you for your cloud compression?
And we kind of touched a little bit on that on the last one. It really is, it could be, a local provider or company, anyone that really has the need for a clearer image delivered faster. Our biggest challenge, Aaron, is that people don't know the disruptive nature, I guess, if you will, of the solution. They don't know that these capabilities are there. But if I ask you, I said, hey, Aaron, if I could provide you a clearer image and I could get it to you faster, would there be value in that? You would be like, well, of course there would. You're not asking it because you don't know it's available. So, our biggest challenge is really educating the market on on these new capabilities, if you will, is part of it. But I guess the short answer would be any customer that has a need for that, and that's pretty much everybody in space, everybody in government. It can be in medical, right? Everyone is looking for a clear image delivered faster.
And it reminds, there's probably a ton of different analogies you could use for that, right? Like you don't know until it's there and you realize how much you can use it. But I think like the smartphones back in the day, because I was old enough to remember having a track phone for emergencies only, right? And thinking about that's what a phone is. I don't need to play. No one's like thinking they want to play Angry Birds. It'd be nice to have the internet, I guess. Is it really that important? But as you mentioned, right, like sometimes it just takes being out there in the public for people to realize that, I can see how much better it can make my business, my life, whatever, right? Makes total sense. So with that smartphone analogy in hand, let's transition to the next question, which is a follow-up on that last question. Do you see Apple as a potential partner or maybe competitor after seeing their compression for text?
Well, that's a great question, Aaron. And as you mentioned, their focus is on text. Ours is on image, but who's not looking for an image, right? So that could be a great play there. I mean, as mentioned, this lossless is the real differentiator. That's something we really should explore. Don't have any relationships there, but they've mastered moving text quicker. We've mastered moving, images quicker.
So, now moving, that, because this is, here it is, right? I have an Apple phone. So it always takes so much longer when I'm putting that image. Obviously, the image is bigger anyway. But what you're saying is those texts could go a lot faster when I'm sending a screenshot of my dog, like a selfie with my dog or something to my wife. It could go a lot faster if they maybe partnered with you. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, absolutely.
There you go.
They're really someone that we should explore.
So Apple, if you're watching this, because I'm sure this is being broadcasted on the big screen at one of your in some conference room or something in Apple, call Tommy. He's willing to talk to chat and talk about it, right? All right, and then one of the other questions before we bring in our special guest, one of the final questions before we bring him in, is what are the potential technical barriers to you that you see as you're scaling your software?
We don't see technical barriers. Our barrier, as I mentioned before, is educating the market on what's available today. Given that, no one's not going to want a clear image delivered faster. They just don't know what's there. So, embedding our software in other applications is obviously going to help us to scale faster. We in multiple discussions with companies on that. So whether we're a standalone or, white labeled into someone else's solution, those will all help scale. The technology is built with that in mind. It's really, how do I educate the market right now?
It's always a little bit of a catch-22, chicken and egg, right? you build it and they will come, but sometimes they don't know enough to come. And so, right, if anyone's watching this has interest, call Tommy, including Apple. All right, so we're going to bring in our special guest, Chris, a member of our investment advisory committee, and he'll join in and ask a couple of questions. Let's bring him up. Hey, Chris, how's it going?
I'm good. Hi, Aaron. Tommy?
Hey, Chris,
Chris, how
For
are you, sir?
everybody that's out here watching and listening, give us your 20-second background and impress us.
Impress you. Okay, that's a tough challenge. So I am a 20 plus year deep tech operator and investor. I have been a space junkie for far longer than that. And I have the pleasure and the honor of having invested in nanoracks, kind of the godfather of new space, more than 10, 11, 12 years ago, and if you know nanoracks, you know they were acquired by Voyager Space Holdings last year, which is pretty exciting. Obviously part of Dylan Taylor's group, a great group of companies. And, I am deeply passionate about seeing space take off and move on, and thrilled by all the activity. And it's a privilege to be part of Space Ventures. I love being part of the IAC for Space Ventures. I've met a lot of great people. I learn a lot, and love to be able to help out. So it's good to be here today.
That's what this is about, right? Is getting everyone, including myself, yourself, getting ourselves smarter on the industry, the investors that are watching, getting a little bit smarter on Pixspan specifically, but in general. So, Chris, you've been listening in. You have some questions, I'm sure, for Tommy as he's, bringing lossless compression to space. I'll let you go ahead and just ask, and you guys can go back and forth, and I'll just be the fly on the wall, watching, listening, and learning.
Yeah, sounds good. Tommy, great job so far. Learned a lot. I think my question is now at this point, given you've covered some of the technological components of it, is really a lot more about Pixspan's place in the space business now and over time. So first, I want to talk a little bit about, let's talk about your real go-to-market into space. So who are you focusing on? Can you get a little bit more detail about the mix between government and the private sector? How do you think about that? Because you've made the point several times about educating and marketing what Pixspan can do, because once people know it, they'll love it and they'll use it everywhere, right? Which I tend to agree with. So how do you go after the right people? Who are they to get the right use cases in, so that kind of word of mouth and awareness spreads in all the ways that matter to you?
Well, certainly in this area, it really is, the satellite companies, who the big guys are, and drone operators. Everyone, all this stuff, is always takes longer, is harder than you think, right, when you start. And to bring new technology to the market takes a little bit longer to get embedded. But as I look at it, everybody has the need, if you will, to move data. So this really great applicability in use cases in space, certainly in the government, on the battlefield, in education, anywhere that is going to involve a lot of data. That could be certainly medical as well. But specifically on the space side, we're really targeting those space companies and also drone companies, because they would all have the same challenge.
And do you think of the mix of, are you going to the telecoms first and kind of getting that knocked out more on the private sector side, on the SAT side of that component of it? Or are you going to do government at the same mix? Are you doing both at the same time? How do you view that rollout of clients, partners, and stuff to be able to really establish yourself in the market?
Well, one of our biggest challenges, obviously, is just people, right? With a small team. So, we cut our teeth, if you will, in Hollywood, and those in the government will tell you that's kind of the proving grounds, if you will, for all things image related, and even the government looks at that. When we look at the government and space side, it just seems like enormous opportunity because of everybody asking really for a clear image, not really understanding what that really means, right? That doubling quadruples the data, and that's not slowing down. That's increasing. So everybody's going to have this challenge. It's really here today.
Okay. And I'm going to divert a little bit into the broader Pixspan business. So besides space, you also do medical imaging and media and entertainment. How do you look at, you made a point just a second ago about resources and resource allocation. How do you look at space in the context of that with the two other markets you're going after? Because although they share the same need for data compression and all the things that you do, they're also very different markets. And, as an investor, I always look at where's the focus of the organization? How can they do really well at any of them? And how do you make those choices and why?
That's a good question. My focus is 100% really on space and government, if you will. We have contractors, as I mentioned early on, that focus in Hollywood. My focus really is, how do we get this technology in space? because I believe that's, where there's a huge, huge opportunity for us. As we grow, would we put a lot of resources on medical? We've already tried our technology, their images or something called DICOM, and we can compress that very quickly. So we know our technology works there. But right now, the focus really is on space, if you will, and the government sectors.
Great. We love to hear that here in the space business.
Yeah, and we all know, right? Like, Chris, I'll just add,
yeah, go ahead.
Government takes time, right? Like
it does.
These are long conversations. Sometimes they can be quick, and there's new things happening with SpaceWorks, AppWorks, and things like that. They're trying to kind of get things a little faster. But, Tommy, just curious, how is that being received? How do you, the timeline, it'll take longer than maybe, me just giving you money to compress my images per se as a commercial provider. I'd love to hear a little bit of commentary on that.
We've been messing around on the government side now for about 18 months and have turned in a couple of these SBIRs, if you will, these small business initiatives, and we're selected, right? So government has recognized our technology as valuable, which was exciting, but unfunded, which isn't as exciting. So we continue to go after those government initiatives, if you will, because, they potentially would provide us, funding to do a lot of other things.
And as you mentioned, there's these things where you can get selected. Hey, this is great, but I don't have the money for you yet. And then there's a whole process, maybe an act of Congress required to actually open up some of the funding, right? So it can take time, and there's a bunch of reasons that can slow you down. So I was just curious how you're feeling that, because as with a focus on government, right, you're learning things every day as you're talking to these people and trying to get, a big contract with a government agency.
But, all these conversations, as you mentioned, they do take longer, but they do validate the need. So it's not a matter of if they're going to need this, right? They need it, right? It's how quickly can we secure funding to start embedding this technology in some of the solutions.
Well, if I can add just out of school, one of the things that strikes me, Tommy, that you have an advantage in that regard is although government will be a great source of business for you, military, SAR, all that stuff, you're not going to be dependent on it quite as much as many other space companies are. And if you look at your media and entertainment business and its intersection with satellites, right, those are adjacent. They're adjacent markets that need each other. They work hand in hand in our modern day and age, right? So your ability to generate revenue, I would think, with that technology for the satellite business in those kinds of markets that's very commercial. It's very private, and it's very now, right? And the numbers are large. So I think that would be, I think your need to go after those long tail government contracts, however juicy they are, probably a little, you have more room to move on that.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Well, my last question is back into the space part of it, which is let's just say you're wildly successful in the SAT business and kind of the LEO part of this. What's the vision for using this across the larger and maybe the edgier parts of space? Where do you think this can go? How do you guys look at that? And, whatever corners of the space business and opportunity you see, where would you go? Where could you go?
Yeah, I think that, like you mentioned, they really are endless, right? Our focus right now is really to be focused where we can try to get some traction very, very quickly. As you guys know, the technology is changing so quickly, and we're, as you might imagine, talking to hundreds of people all the time. Part of that is education, but also trying to understand where our technology could be used on a larger play and what enhancements might the technology need. So I'm not specifically answering, the greater vision of, beyond LEO, but those opportunities are clearly there as you look and understand the challenges that they face today.
Yeah, I would guess that the further out we go, the more important your technology is, right? It's just simple math, right? And so it plays right into this.
It's simple math, and I still believe that, again, getting that image is the easy piece. It's moving as the challenge, but, providing a combination of both where, I'll always need to move a lot of data. So lossless will always be around, but combining that, so finding those players that see the advantage of a hybrid, if you will, solution, a hybrid data mover, I think that's the one that's going to gain the traction the quickest. And that would be, as we discussed earlier, where's the growth? The growth and scalability is in partnering and as an OEM on existing companies that already have that traction and already have that business. They pull us in because we're providing something unique that doesn't exist today.
Sounds great.
Very exciting.
That's very exciting. Thanks, Tommy. That's the end of my questions. Best of luck to you.
Well, Tommy, that is all the questions, because Chris kind of had the final word on the questions there. So you get the last wrap up. You got people watching. What do you want them to walk away thinking as they close this out?
Put me on the spot here. I think if I think back and I look at Pixspan, what excites me about Pixspan is, again, all of this is proprietary. It's patented. It's very, very unique. There's a play for it today. It's needed. There's this education piece that we've spoken about, but this is a great train to jump on, if you will, right now. I believe that. Certainly I wouldn't be here. And we're just excited to get this to market as quickly as we can. The good news, I think, is that, this is proven technology, proven in Hollywood. So as mentioned, we've cut our teeth there. This technology is ready to go. We're just kind of like a hammer looking for a nail here. We're just excited about what the near future is.
Well, thanks for the time, Tommy. I'm obviously excited about it. Chris, clearly, he can't hide it on his face. He's excited about it. So appreciate it, guys. Thanks for that. Everyone that's watching, thanks for taking the time. And feel free to drop questions in the discussion thread where Tommy can go in and asynchronously answer those questions as well. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, gentlemen.